Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Microsoft Learning Rooms Construction Series. This one is focused on AZ-500, and this series is focused on MFA, multi-factor authentication, and password protection. And my name is Sarah Kong, and I'm a Microsoft technical trainer, and I'm here with Matt Hester. Hey, Matt.
Hey, Sarah, how are you? I'm also a Microsoft technical trainer. As I will tell anybody who wants to listen or listen to it again, I think we should be Microsoft Azure technical trainers. That way we're all Matt. By the way, it just makes it easy for me to remember my name that's here. We got another exciting topic. What are we talking about today, Sarah? You never tell me these things. You just say, Matt, put the picture on a slide and we're going to go.
I just say, Matt, just show up, turn your camera on, and look pretty and sound smart. That's what I say.
I at least got one of those. My mom said I had a face for radio.
To
so
look pretty good. Or to get smart? No,
I'm not going to say it. I'm going to let the audience determine.
All right. So, Matt, MFA. Obviously, well, not obviously, but I think we've been hearing about MFA for years now.
Yes.
So how does that work in Azure, and what should our customers know, and how should we pass that for the exam about MFA?
So what do we hear all the time? Zero
trust.
Yeah, but people stop there. They say zero trust. We have a zero trust environment. No, you don't. You know why you don't have a zero trust environment? Because if you had zero trust environment, you wouldn't trust anybody. Your computers wouldn't even be turned on. It's right. I mean, if it's zero trust, I have problems with this word. I love our security industry. I love how Microsoft approaches security. And as I talk and oftentimes will say, Microsoft is a large security company you've never heard of. Because back when we set up our environments, we didn't really think about security. Now we do. And all of a sudden this phrase shows up in our content, zero trust. I'm like, zero trust, that doesn't make any sense. Because if I didn't trust anybody, nothing's turned on. It's a phrase. So we just shorten that. Zero trust, always verify is all this. And that's where multi-factor comes in. And when you think about the phrase, it tells you all you need to know. Multi-factor authentication. We're going to authenticate in multiple ways. In other words, I don't trust, zero trust in your first authentication mechanism. I'm going to make you verify by adding another authentication mechanism. And that's what multi-factor authentication mechanisms are. So if we take a look at that, just really quick in the board, is we have a user. And they give a username and a password, and they're going to give it to Azure AD. It's going to come in here, and Azure AD is going to say, prove it. How do we know when we can't see somebody coming into our environment? How do we know they are who they say they are? They say it's prove it. You've got to prove who you are. This is multi-factor authentication. And this prove it signal will come back to that user, and they're going to give MFA. Now, here's where the cool thing is, Sarah. This could be a PIN, could be a thumbprint, could be a face, could be a FIDO key, could be a USB device, could be a phone, could be an app on the phone, could be a call to your mom. Just kidding. Although we could set it up that it could design a thing, call your mom, say, who is that person that's calling me, right? Multi-factor authentication is proving who you are. So whenever we come into this environment, we have a username and password. And up until recently, and because Sarah, I thought you did a great job, everybody's heard of this, right? And why has everybody heard of this? With multi-factor authentication, it's something like 99% of all brute force password packs fail. What did I just tell everybody? Passwords don't matter anymore. They don't. Matter of fact, as you build out your single sign-on, something we're not talking about today, but as you go forward more with this environment, you're going more to a passwordless environment. Things like facial recognition. You know, and Sarah, I don't know if you know, how often do you change your Microsoft password?
I think the last time I changed, I've been here 3 years. I think it was like a year ago.
Yeah, about a year ago. We shut it all down. Matter of fact, and by the way, and don't say anything, but you know what your password is?
What my password is?
Yeah.
No, I never remember it. That's why I had to change it.
Exactly.
I couldn't remember it.
Exactly right.
There was
So
a system that asked me for it. I'm like, why are you asking me for my password? I don't remember it.
yeah, and so when I first joined Microsoft, 23 years ago, 23, yeah, I've been here for a while. We had to change our passwords regularly, every I think 3 months or 6 months, something like that. We had to change it. We no longer do that. Why? Because we've enabled throughout our entire organization this thing called multi-factor authentication. And in our case, a lot of it shows up with Windows Hello on our laptops, which we use mainly facial recognition for our laptops. But you can also use PIN. Everybody thinks Hello's facial recognition software. It's actually an API set that allows all kinds of different variations of MFA based on the type of device, because not all the devices have the camera for Windows Hello facial recognition, but that's what we use. And so, like Sarah, I don't even know what my password is. And so if I ever need my password, I have to reset my password so I can use it wherever I have.
Exactly. Frustrating.
It is. Well, and here's the most frustrating thing. I've been to Hong Kong and traveling, and back when we used to print out our vouchers for people to get the free exams when they would come to our classes, and I had to go to the printer. Well, the printer asked me to authenticate, but the printer didn't have a way to know who I was until I registered the device, which required me to put a username and password that I couldn't remember. So I had to do a self-service password reset so I could reset my password to log into the printer, to print out the vouchers for my class, to set up my badge. So the next time I went over to go print something out, I just had to swipe my badge. So you do have to know your username and password to enable all this information and get it going. But then after that, you don't need it anymore, because now we're going to tie it to very specific devices and so on. So people try to make multi-factor authentication complicated. And I would say before Azure Active Directory, setting up an MFA environment was complicated. It wasn't easy or intuitive to do. But now it's pretty much just a matter of a switch. For every user that we want to set up, we set up a multi-factor authentication. Then it's up to you as an organization of how do you accomplish that.
So is there one that's more secure than the other? Like, is Face more secure than PIN, or FIDO more secure than USB? Or is it doesn't really matter, or use more than one? What would you recommend?
It's used more than one, and it boils down to devices, really. And so, we all started out multi-factor authentication. We had our phones, right? And you got a phone call or you got a text message that you had to put in. And still a lot of people use that. But we now have on our phones, we have things called authenticator apps. And authenticator app is actually pretty important, but it does a fundamental thing that I think good MFA needs to do, is that it puts in on your device, whatever it happens to be, whether it's a phone, your laptop in the case of Hello, or your FIDO keys, those hardware devices that we plug in, it puts a token on them. So for example, Sarah, you have I think probably the same laptop I do, a Surface, and I have a Surface laptop. Hello for me won't work on your laptop, because when you configure that device, you're asked to sign in, you have to use your username and password once, and then it created a token on the device tied to your Hello profile. So I can't just steal your face and bring it over to my laptop. It won't work because I don't have that token on my device. I'd have to have your face and your token and your device in presence to get you to log on and get you to look at the screen. I'd have to have both. I can't do one without the other. If you think about most bad actors in the world today, they might have your username and password, but they don't have your laptop. And if they have your laptop, they probably can't log in because they don't have the facial recognition to do this. Because Hello is such an amazing technology that it can tell the difference between twins. First time I ever saw a demonstration was two Microsoft employees that were twins walked on stage, and the joke they made is Windows can do something our mother cannot, tell us apart. And that's how good these technologies are.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all about, and especially with the facial recognition, it's all about the depthness of your nose, the width of your eyes, And so basically with those twins, they probably had like even just like an inch that we can't even see, or a tiny little, I don't know, millimeter that we don't see, but the AI technology saw it, right? It sees that the one eye is a little bit off from the other twin, so it's pretty cool that way.
And the great thing about this is not even limited just to our regular users. Now, granted, you want MFA in your organization. It's how we prove those things. It's how we verify you are who you are. Remember, zero trust, always verify. That's why we do these MFA things. One of my good friends works for an American professional football team in a cold climate area, and they've actually designed a recognition software for season ticket holders. So I want you to imagine, Sarah, You're walking to an American football game. It is -2 degrees outside. You got your hoodie on. You got your face mask on, so your face it doesn't freeze. You have everything bundled up. The last thing you want to do is take off your mask, your hat, your parka, so they can do facial recognition. So they designed software that just looks at your face, looks at your eyes. So now when they go to this, they can tie it to their tickets and they can verify that really is the season ticket holder walking into the game, so they can avoid fraud. And so these are being done today. So this is not science or science fiction. Everybody, if you've seen the Tom Cruise movie Minority Report, that actually is pretty much now today a lot of things that we can do with eye recognition. It gets very, very sophisticated.
Yeah, it's like too, especially when we just went through or still going through COVID, right? Yeah, everybody had to wear masks, and then you're in the store and you want to unlock your phone so you can pay, and your mask is in the way, and you got to pull it down, and people are looking at you, and you're like, I'm trying to unlock my phone. So yeah, those are the MFA days. Yeah.
And that's what's great
with
about
the
this. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say with MFA for the AZ-500 course, what do the learners need to focus on? How to set it up, or?
A little bit of everything. So what I want to do there is I want to show you a little bit in the portal here. Enough drawing. Let me hop over to the portal really quick, and we can talk briefly about that. Inside of MFA, what we can do is set it up per user. Now, how do you get there? I'm already got it set up, so I'll show you how to do it. You go to the Users tab, and you go to an option that says Per User MFA, and this takes you to a portal that lets you set up multi-factor authentication. Now, what I want to do here is kind of talk about the differences between three terms that you see, and I'm just going to highlight them right here. We have disabled, enabled, and enforced. Those are the three states that a user will be of MFA. And for your exam, you're going to want to know the difference between these two. Disabled, pretty obvious. We haven't turned it on for that particular user, which, by the way, in our Defender for Cloud projects, this will flag. It'll say you don't have users that are MFA. It'll let us know that we're not doing something to help keep our environment secure. We have enabled and we have enforced. And what's the difference between the two? Enabled means I've turned it on. So for M. Sabane, the user that I have right there, I've enabled them. What they have when I enable it, so if I enable it for you, Sarah, you have 14 days to configure it. So the next time you log on after I enable it, you're going to get a login box. Would you like to set up MFA now? For 14 days, you can say no. You don't have to say yes. You can say no. And by saying no, you're saying, look, I just don't want to do it right now. Maybe you don't have your phone handy or whatever they're asking you to do. But at that 14th day, it's going to come up and say, you're going to set up MFA. It's not going to be polite anymore. It's going to say, you're going to do this. And if you don't do that, you don't get to play inside of it. When you go from enabled and you configure MFA, you then become what is called an enforced user. Enforced is you have MFA configured and set up and enabled. In other words, it's already turned on. So the next time you log on, you're going to have your multi-factor authentication come into bear. This is important when you work, and this is an exam kind of tip, when you work with conditional access policies, because conditional access at the very end of it can require additional multi-factor authentication challenge, the users have to be enforced. If they're enabled, conditional access will block that user until they go and get it enforced. Yeah, and so just kind of it's a little bit of kind of a misnomer, but enabled just basically gives you a 14-day grace period.
Yeah.
And we can do that pretty easy here.
14 days, or is it that's the default and you can't change
Sarah, that's a great question. And maybe I know it's the default. I don't know if you can change it.
I don't think you can either.
I don't think there's a way to configure that, but what most folks will do is they'll write a script, because unfortunately you can't really do it in the portal easily. They'll write a script that'll take them right from disabled to enforced, and so they'll avoid the whole 14-day gap altogether. There's definite ways to do that. But what's interesting to me about this is that, let's say I select this user. I'll just select my own account here. I can enable it if it's disabled. I can enforce it if it's enabled. So I can still do it through the portal, but it's a two-step process. But the thing I like to point out here is the manage user settings here. And this provides some really good nibbly bits. Require the user select a contact method again. Maybe they got a new phone. Maybe something happened and they need to reset that method up so they can actually reconfigure the tool. Delete all existing app passwords. Now this one, I like it's there. I kind of hope you don't get tested on it. You may, because it's in the testing materials. But this is for older applications. Some older applications don't know how to understand the multi-factor authentication token. They don't know what it is. And so what'll happen is when you configure it for users, and you can regenerate this if you need to, is it creates a password at the end of this whole scenario. And the only way you'll know you need it is when you come into an app, it's going to, even if you have single sign-on enabled, it's going to say, hey, who are you? And it's going to prompt for the MFA signal, and it's going to try to let you in, but it doesn't have the right password. So you have to provide what's called an app password. In the real world, folks, I have not seen this in years. Although I chuckle every time I see this. I remember I was teaching MFA, and I said, before we go on, you need to go turn it on right now. And I had a good friend of mine runs one of our partners is in the room, so I'm going to turn it on right now. They had some legacy versions of Outlook that didn't know how to read the MFA token. He turned it on, he couldn't check his email, so he had to go back in and turn it off. And even when I was going through this, I remember you said, write down that password. He forgot to write it down, so he just turned it off and was more thoughtful about following my advice. And the last one is restore multi-factor authentication for all remembered devices. So, hey, maybe I need to reset this up. You can do a lot of things with that token. You don't have to always prompt somebody with MFA. Heck, you could even configure Azure AD. If you have guest accounts, like in a B2B scenario, you can trust the MFA token they got from their identity provider for a period of time when they come into mine, or you can still require another MFA. So that's one way we can enable them here.
And then what about the user? Can they pick and choose what authentication they can use? Like if they want to use a face or PIN or whatever?
No, that's a great question. So I'm going to say yes and no. Yes, they can pick and choose what we allow them to pick and choose from. No, they don't have control over that. So we can control that in our authentication mechanisms. Let me show you that really quick. So let me head over to our Azure AD. Let me go back to our main blade here. I'm going to hop into security. And in security, I'm going to hop into authentication methods. And this is where I can come in and set up the different types of authentication methods I want to enable for my particular environment, where I can set up, do you want to use a FIDO key, authenticator, SMS? And as you can see here, and just as an FYI, this is my demo environment. So whenever I teach classes on identity, I normally reset this all back so I can show them turning it on in the road. So I don't have anything done because this is not what I would call a functional environment. It's a demonstration learning environment to use all those different methods that I can come into it. But if I want to use authenticator as an example, I can just click on this and simply just enable that. I can then even configure how that method works. What makes this really cool is every one of those authentication methods you saw there all have different configurations because they're different styles of proving who they are of how we can do those authentication apps. Do we require push? How do we do password lists? Do we show geographic information that's there? What's going on inside the environment? And what that does, I will tell you, if you have a choice, at the minimum, get the authenticator apps. And the reason why, because it puts a token on my specific phone. It's not enough for a bad actor to have my username and password. They have to have my username and password and my phone. And additionally, our authenticator apps that we have from Microsoft not only require my phone with the token on it, but when I go into the authenticator app, I have to use facial recognition on the phone. So somebody could have my phone and my username and my password, but they couldn't open up the authenticator app because they don't have my face. And so there's a lot of ways we look at this. And oftentimes in modern environments, it's not just two methods for authentication. Almost invariably, I see it a minimum three because of the facial recognition, especially with our phones. And if you don't have a phone that does facial recognition, you have an older iPhone, you might have the old thumbprint. They do the same thing. You have to have the person plus the device. And it's actually kind of interesting because as we started this, we don't change our passwords very often at Microsoft. But what the cool thing is, I don't have to. I've been actually sitting at my home watching TV, and all of a sudden my phone pops up with an authenticator app saying, can you please put in the number and imagine the scenario, right? This bad actor, and apparently the bad actor at this time was in Iceland because it came up with my notification, authentication coming from Iceland. And it says, can you please put the number on the screen in the box? And so I'm thinking to myself, I'm waiting for the phone call from the bad actor. Hey, can you put this number on your authenticator app? You are the last barrier. The answer to that is no, I am not going to put that number on. Who are you, right? By the way, they ain't calling you. If they're trying to break into your account, they're not picking up the phone to call you. This is why it's so important.
Yeah, I love that. And then with the Microsoft Authenticator, once you as the administrator sets up these security authentication methods, then the user themselves, they have their own portal that they would log into and configure all of that, right?
Yeah,
So going
they
in
have
and
their
doing
own
all that.
configuration. It's there, and that's a common question we get in our classes. And there's not really a way that I know of, and maybe Sarah, you know, a way to avoid this. Is there's about a few seconds of when you turn this on of gap where if a hacker does have the username and password, they might be able to compensate the phone, but it's very quick. In other words, I would recommend you turn this on at 7:55 in the morning, and you only have a 5-minute window of risk that people log in at 8 and you turn it on.
Right.
But the great thing about this, they can always be challenged. And we talked about this about user risk. If all of a sudden, let's say your user was a compromised account, Sarah, and somebody got your username and password, well, we could set up our user risk identification. So when you come in and say, hey, your user's at risk, you have to reset your passwords, reset your authentication apps. We can force you to do all this and log out any existing credentials. So we can really protect you from that identity perspective.
Yeah. And then the big thing too is that obviously we're trying to get away from using passwords, but we still have to use them. So
Yes.
is there a way, and I think password protection is where we're going with this, but how does password protection protect the company from people using silly passwords, I like to say?
Yeah, okay, silly passwords. Well, there's two ways to look at it. One, you're seeing on the screen, this one right here, the FIDO security keys. These are getting what we call passwordless environments. So in other words, I'm protecting my password by not having a password that we have. That's one way we look at it. In Azure, we have this other thing that's right below here called password protection, where we can actually set up our environments. Now, a couple things here are our smart lockout thresholds and our custom banned password list. Like we do have certain passwords you're not allowed to use, like for example, password. You can't use password, but we can actually create our own lists that will adhere to these different things. And they're all scored on an environment. Now, if I can find it, let me see if I can make sure I can find the article here real quick. Let me see, it's a custom ban. I thought it would pop up in this list. There's an article, and we'll try to put a link in the video for this for y'all, is explaining how we score those passwords, because not all passwords are equal. It's what kind of characters you're using, how can you read it, you know, especially if you've ever looked at license plates and people put a little message in their license plate. We can do the same thing with our passwords to make it a password, but make it a strong password. So it may look like a word, but we can actually get rid of some of those things. So we do a lot to protect those passwords. We also have a smart lockout. And this one's interesting to me because I don't know if it was one of our competitors that personally did it. It was one I ran into. My youngest, back when she was coming up, she was learning how to read with her iPad. They had some really neat software that was teaching her how to read. Amazing brain science around it. I won't even go into that. But she also had an iPad, which means she had access to games and fun and all that stuff. But I set up hours. Like she had only so many hours that she could use that. Well, Sarah, guess what she guessed?
How to log in with your account?
Yeah, she guessed my username and password, and she got rid of the child protection hours. And then she couldn't remember what she reset the password to. Now, by the way, that was a story I was told. But what happened was I tried to go into the system, and I'm trying to get in, and after 4 or 5 things, it says, now you have to wait a minute. And then I try again.
Oh, yeah.
Then I have to wait another minute. Then I have to wait another minute. Then I have to wait. And I had, and the time didn't go down. It kept going out. That's a version of Smart Lockout. Smart Lockout locks out those logins, because when people are doing brute force attacks, they're just sending passwords as quick as they can against your environment. And what we're doing here is after so many, we now are going to increase this time and how that duration is. We don't identify the duration. I do know, I think it's once a day I can change a password on that. Since then, she no longer uses said iPad, so I've refactor reset it because that's the only way I could get around it. I hide my head in shame. What happened, by the way, she actually confessed. She saw me put the password in, and she wrote it down. And so I wasn't protecting my visual sight lines as I was changing the password. She wrote it down, and I was actually, Sarah, to be very honest with you, I was kind of proud of her. I was kind of like, that's my girl.
I got a little criminal in the making here.
I'm like, I didn't believe it even, because anyways. The other thing that we have here is, especially when you have a hybrid environment where you have Active Directory domain services or Windows Server Active Directory. And by the way, just an exam tip, whenever you take any of our exams, think in Microsoft terms and terminologies and best practices. So on the exam, they'll say Azure Active Directory. And for on-prem directory, they might just say Active Directory, or they'll say Active Directory domain services. So whenever you see just Active Directory, or Active Directory domain services, you know you're dealing with an on-prem scenario and whatever the question might be. In context of our conversation here, guess what? We can now put password protection agents onto domain controllers, and they can leverage the power of the cloud for the same types of things that we do for our native cloud users. So we can basically extend our password protection to an on-prem environment.
That's nice. Perfect. So that's password protection, MFA. Anything else we need to know?
No, I think it's one of those ones that we talk about, turn MFA on and you won't ever regret it. And by the way, when you do turn it on, your users won't be happy with you, but that's okay. We don't want them to break. We don't want those accounts to be compromised. And there's all kinds of reporting done on this. When you go through conditional access, you can see what signal was the one that blocked it or allowed them in. So there's a lot of work that's done inside of it. So MFA is not a choice. And I know as you're doing some more of these construction series, Sarah, remember, this is just one piece. We talked about user risk in one, MFA in another. When you start looking at everything that's inside of a signal, we can block against pretty much everything that's coming into our environment. So this is just one part of all those tools working together in conjunction.
Yeah, and I like to go back to what you just said there about your users won't be happy about it. And it's like you said, MFA is a pain in the butt to get up and going for the users, but we can also, as administrators, like I said, in another series, we're going to be talking about conditional access. I can say, based on where you're working from or what device you're on, I won't enforce you to use MFA, right? You can just use your face screen or whatever, and then I won't make you go through all more hoops to log in and so on. Yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
well, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, you're welcome, Sarah.
What you had something else you want to say?
I was going to say, when you think about that, even what location are you coming from? Are you a home network? Are you a corporate network?
Right.
All this factors into, are we going to challenge our users additionally? And how do we make our environment safe and secure, but still productive, that people are going to come in? Because it's zero trust, always verify. And those methods may happen again, like, well, I don't trust your MFA. I think whenever I think about MFA, the easiest way to remember this is travel. If you start traveling, or you're traveling now, or you traveled in the past, the modern airport is the prime example of multi-factor authentication. Yeah. What happens when you walk in? And we're going to go a little old school. So I like to go say hello to people. So I like to go to the ticketing agent to get my ticket. I just want to say hello. Generally, I'm trying to see if I can get a first class upgrade, which has never worked. But I like to say hello. And what happens when I walk up to that person? They ask me, where am I going? Hey, I'm going to Seattle today. What do they ask for me next? They ask for my identification. They don't believe me. So they ask for my driver's license. I give them a driver's license. They then give me a ticket. And from a security perspective, I always geek out on this. I just got a role as a passenger, which means I now can go into the airport as a role of a passenger. But before I go into the airport, who do I have to go to? I have to go to the security checkpoint.
Right.
Guess what? They don't trust the ticketing agent. And if you're using your phones, they don't trust that that's a legitimate ticket. What do they ask me for? My ID and my ticket. They just multi-factor authenticated me in two versions. And I got one version when I talk to the ticket agent. I got two here. And I just recently traveled, and they're starting to do facial recognition on my driver's license to verify it's me. So they're really doing these things. So when you look at the airport, I don't think anybody, by the way, anybody who hops on a plane, Sarah, is probably going to think multi-factor authentication. And that's okay. That's how you think about what it is.
That's just us Microsoft brains going all the time. Oh, look at the security, the layers. And, after you go through this AZ-500 course, you're going to be thinking like that too.
Oh, yeah.
Look at all the layers and layers and layers of security upon one. Logging in to actually doing something in my application. Well, there's so many different layers.
And that's where it starts, right? Because after you get past the TSA person, you have to walk through a scanner, firewall. Yeah. Then you can only go someplace else. Network security groups. Trust me, I have a whole story around airport travel that covers all the layers of security.
I think we're running out of time here, Matt. We better get
Yes, we are. I'll stop.
All right. Well, thank you for joining, and thank you, Matt, for this lovely talk. And I hope you enjoyed this and keep on learning.